Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week I've got something pretty rare and special here for you guys to see. This is called the Super Famicom Box. So for those of you that don't know, what exactly is a Super Famicom Box? Well, this is a customized console that Nintendo used in Japan only, and it was basically used in hotels, and the idea was that you could drop 100 yen into like a little dispenser or something like that, and for a certain amount of time, you'd be able to play Super Nintendo games. So they made a similar kind of product called the Famicom Box back in the 80s. It's also similar to arcade machines that they have, like the Super System Arcade, where you basically put in quarters into an arcade machine and you can play Super Nintendo games for a certain fixed period of time. So, as you can see, this console actually does work, but what we're going to be doing today is something that's never been tried before, or at least as far as I can tell, has never been documented. So what I want to do is take this thing apart, and I'm going to add two things. One is I'm going to add some extension cables for the controllers because they really don't give you a lot of slack, so that just kind of sucks. Having extenders would also let you use things like turbo controllers and whatever. That's rather trivial. The harder thing, the more interesting thing I'm going to be doing today is adding RGB to this console and potentially S-video as well. So what I suspect is that most of the guts of a Super Nintendo lie inside of here. And I'm hoping that there's enough there that I can either tap in and get all of the necessary video signals, or maybe with a Super Nintendo RGB bypass board, I can get what I need so that we have RGB on this console. All right, so let me go ahead and tear this thing apart and let's see what's on the inside. All right, so to take apart a Super Famicom box, you actually need a couple of very unique specialized tools. I'd say this is actually probably one of the hardest consoles to open up, period. So first thing you need is a game bit screwdriver, but this is actually no ordinary game bit screwdriver. So it's a little bit larger than the size that people typically use. So normally if you buy like a game bit kit, you'll get something like this blue one right here. This is the kind of screw set that opens the Super Nintendo and a couple of other things. There's also a smaller one which is used to open up game consoles, but I'm gonna put these side by side, and so you can hopefully see that the bit on this yellow one right here is ever so slightly larger. So that's to deal with these security screws like this one right here. So this regular one is not going to do anything. It's just way too small. You can't get it in there, can't do anything. So you need to find one of those larger ones first. This took me and my friend a while, but eventually we found someone on eBay that sells these specifically for opening up Super Famicom Box. So that's what we ended up doing. We ended up buying a set of these. I'll see if I can find another link and place it on the description of the video. But if I can't find it, then at least you have an idea of what to do. The second thing you need is keys. So there are these two security locks here that keep the front panel down, and you really have to open this up in order to take the top cover off. So my friend also got these from Japan, so this is a set of Super Famicom Box keys. That being said, you could probably get an average, locksmith to come in and make keys for you. So these two keys, there's two of them that are identical. They go on both sides. You have to twist them in order to open up the top. There's also a key over here, and this this key is for turning it into the on and off position. I think this has to do with coin operation, if I remember correctly. I'm not entirely sure, but it's not needed to operate the console. You can actually, as you saw, just plug it in and turn it on, and it'll instantly start outputting video. But again, for opening it up, you really just need these small keys. So from here, let's go ahead and take the console apart and have a look at what's on the inside. Okay, so I have the main PCB for the Super Famicom Box right here. And as you can see, I've actually already done a mod to it. And I apologize for really not filming that, but it wasn't filmed mainly just because I had to figure out whether such a mod was even possible, and I had to carefully trace out exactly where to go in order to add RGB to this board. So first, let me just talk a little bit about what the board has on it and how it's similar to a standard Super Famicom or Super Nintendo. So as you can see down here, it has basically the exact same chips as a standard Super Nintendo. So we've got a CPU, we've got PPU1, PPU2, and the work RAM and video RAM right here. We've got the sound chips right here and the RAM for the sound chips. Now there's other logic as well for the Super Famicom box, and that's not surprising because this thing is more than just a Super Famicom. But from what I can tell, at least, a fairly significant amount of this is identical to a real Super Nintendo. It's just you know, extra stuff added on, a few things removed like RGB and S-Video, and a lot of extra logic. So anyhow, so the next question on your minds might be, well, okay, is it possible to get RGB on this, and how exactly did I figure that out? So the answer to that question is absolutely. It does appear possible to get RGB from this thing. So to show you that, what I'm going to do is actually switch to a different camera view and talk about how I found it. But first, let me just show you where I mapped out all of the various signals. So I'll start, I guess, with the top of the board here. So what I found was that S-Video is present on this chip right here. This is the SENC chip. It's exactly the same as the one used on a Super Nintendo. So S-Video, which is Luma and Chroma, come directly out from here, and they get processed on a normal Super Nintendo motherboard with a few other passive components and then sent to the multi-out. C-Sync is also present here, but just like Luma and Chroma, it also gets processed by a few components before it's sent to the multi-out. Those components are not present on this board. So I was definitely very reluctant to just send raw Luma, Chroma, and C-Sync to a multi-out. So what I thought of was maybe using this Super Nintendo Junior RGB board. This is made by Borti, and it's very similar to the one made by Voltar. It allows you to add RGB and S-Video to a SNES Junior. And these boards just require the raw Luma, Chroma, and C-Sync be fed into them. So that's what I'm doing here. So you can see that I'm tapping Luma from pin 23 right here. I'm tapping Chroma from pin 6, and I'm tapping C-Sync from pin 8 over here. And those are just the raw, unprocessed versions of those signals, and they're getting fed in down here. And then the output is over here. So this is C-Sync, this is Luma, and this is Chroma. Now, this board also needs to be powered, so I found a spot for ground right over here on the negative side of this capacitor right here. And I found a spot right here for 5 volts. It's this little isolated via that's right here. And I tested that by connecting it up using my multimeter to various other points on the board that definitely have 5 volts, and it has 5 volts. So that's how I know where I'm getting my 5 volts and my ground. So those are S-Video and my sync signals. Now let me flip over really quickly onto this side of the board. And what you'll see over here is a set of transistors and passive components right over here. So what I found is that when raw RGB comes out of PPU2 on a standard Super Nintendo, it gets fed into a set of transistors and passives just like this. And at some point, the signal branches off. One part of it branches off and goes to the SENC chip, and it's used to make S-Video and composite. But on a regular Super Nintendo, at a certain point, the signal branches out and goes straight to the multi-out. So thankfully, all of those parts are here. And the reason why they're here is because these parts are also needed to make composite video and S-Video. So I tapped in at the exact same point that the multi-out would normally tap in on a standard Super Nintendo. And I'm just going to feed that processed RGB straight to the multi-out. Over here, I just have a source of 5 volts. This is going to go to the multi-out as well. Here is my left and right channel audio. Those are just going straight to the jack, so I didn't have to think about that at all. I'm just tapping straight in from the left and right channel audio jacks. And lastly, I need a point to ground on the multi-out, so I am just tapping in this big ground here, and I'm going to send that to the multi-out as well. All right, so from here, I'm going to just switch to a different camera view, and I'm going to kind of go through how it was I figured all of this out so you guys can understand the process. Okay, so I have the underside of the PCB over here, and I'm just going to show you the process by which I found RGB and all of the various signals needed in order to do this modification. So on the other side, you have PPU2, and there are 3 pins. It's actually, I can just show you real quick. So here's our PPU2, and we're looking for pins 95, 96, and 97, which are right over here. So this is the raw RGB out. This is the first place that it shows up on the board. You can actually see a place where I highlighted on the PCB. So I found that these 3 vias right here are RGB, and I found that this via right here is C-Sync. So now let's flip the board over. And the next question we have is, all right, where exactly does that stuff go? And so to do that, I basically just follow these lines. So this is the connection for blue. And if you follow that trace, it goes right over here to this transistor right here. And looking at the schematic, you can see that that's actually what happens on a normal Super Nintendo. So normally RGB goes straight to a transistor, and then the output of that transistor is fed into some passives and also into a secondary transistor. And at some point between a 180 ohm and 130 ohm resistor, that's where RGB is extracted and sent out to the multi-out. And so you can see for RGB, there's an 180 ohm and 130 ohm resistor right over here for each of the 3 colors, and they're tied together. So on a normal Super Nintendo, you'd have a via, and a trace rather, going out straight from here to the multi-out, and that's how RGB would work. And there's no other processing to the signal. So that's why I'm fairly confident that I can simply tap in here at RGB and send that to a multi-out, and we'll have normal RGB from a 3-chip Super Nintendo. So I probably didn't mention this, but the way I'm mapping out connectivity is by using my multimeter, placing it into continuity mode, and if there's a connection between 2 points, you get a beep. So that's how I was able to track things down and find all of those various signals. Now, C-Sync is a whole other matter. So I was telling you before that C-Sync is this little via right here. I was able to trace it to all the way up to here and here. So if I use my meter, you can see that it goes like that, and that also goes to pin 100 of the PPU. Now, those little vias, they go directly to 2 chips. They go to the Super Nintendo S, E, and C right here. They also go to this chip as well. I'm not entirely sure of the purpose of this chip. I don't believe it's something that's normally on a Super Nintendo, but again, I could be mistaken. My knowledge here isn't perfect. I don't see C-Sync going anywhere else to be processed any other way. And that actually makes sense, because I think that this board only needs C-Sync so that it can be fed into the encoder chip, and then that C-Sync is mixed with Luma, and it's mixed with composite video so that you can have composite video and whatever else. So that's why I took the raw C-Sync straight from here. This pin also connects to pin 100. Just get that connected up. Right? Oh, sorry, not that one. That's Luma. Right here. Yeah, there we go. Pin 8. This is Luma, this is C-Sync. So C-Sync is just going straight into the board. All right, so that's a fair amount of talking. I hope that helps to explain exactly how it is that I found all of these various signals. So now I'm going to partially reassemble the board, and we're going to figure out a place to install this multi-out. Okay, so I have the entire Famicom box here in all of its glory, and so since I didn't film the disassembly, what I'm going to end up doing now is just filming the reassembly, because it's basically everything in reverse. So the first thing that you got to do is reseat the motherboard like this so that the audio jacks go here. There's actually an external power cord right here up in the corner. This comes from the power supply, which I never needed to touch. This is original and I didn't have to mess with it. And so that power cord comes into here, and that's what powers the Super Famicom box. So from here, I just have these 5 screws that hold everything into place. And I did clip away a little bit at the metal bracket that holds this thing down. That's just so that I could easily get my wires to come up, and I have plenty of slack so that I can eventually either route it over here in the back, but I think I'm probably going to end up routing it here on the side, because there's a panel on the side that's completely unused where it could potentially go. Not only that, this particular bracket has a purpose. It's being held, it's being used to hold this daughter card, which I haven't shown yet. So let me just grab that real quick. So this is probably the next thing that we need to install, this little daughter card that sits right over here. Now, I believe it probably just has the standard Super Famicom Box boot ROM, because, well, that's what it says right here. It says K-ROM 1 right over there. And this little save here is just to, or this battery rather, is to save settings and what have you. And it's pretty easy to replace this with a socket if it ever needs to be replaced. So yeah, this just feeds right into this little card slot right here. And then we've got 4 screws to hold that in place. So the screw that goes into this post here is slightly longer than the other 2 that go in the back. Those are the regular size that all of the Phillips screws are. I'm just going to go ahead and put this one in. Okay, normally there is a standoff and a very long screw that goes in this corner right here, but I decided that I would remove that, mainly just because I needed a place for the wires to route out, and there really wasn't any other option aside from over here in the front, which would have been extremely awkward to access. So I decided instead just to use this instead for the wires to come out. Okay, so now that that's done, the next step is going to be to plug this little connector here. This gives you RF video in and out, and it also gives you composite and mono sound. So I think that's what this here does. I never actually opened this box, but I'm guessing that this is just basically your standard RF modulator in here, and of course composite video. All right, so now that that's out of the way, we're going to go ahead and add the next bit of connectors. This over here is just the connectors for the front panel. So it goes just like this. And this connector right here, this actually connects the controller PCB and the power supply, I believe, or maybe not, maybe it's just the controllers. You can't really see it yet, but over here underneath the power supply are the controller ports. So let me go ahead. I actually think that might be all it is just the controls. And then you can see here there's a riser card, and so this is where the games actually get installed. And then let me just reseat that connector. You can't really see it on camera anymore, but I just got to make sure that the controller, there we go, the controller assembly now is connected to the main board. And you can kind of see it now, but here are actually the controller ports. So they're just standard Super Famicom or Super Nintendo controller ports. All right, so to attach this guy in place, there are 6 screws, 3 on this side and then 3 on the opposite side. Now we have this little harness here, this holder of the harness. So this is gonna just kind of clip down and clip up like this. And so you see these in arcade PCBs and arcade assemblies and also in other kiosks. So it just keeps all the wires tight and managed. All right, so we might as well go ahead and install some games next. So we've got Super Mario Kart and Star Fox on here. And then you use these tabs actually to eject it, I believe. Yeah, you just pull them out like that to eject and like this to insert. And I can't remember what this is, but we'll find out. I know Yoshi's Island is on here, Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario World 2. Not sure what the other one is, but yeah, there we go. So that's actually, I believe, 4 games total that are now installed. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is install the little tray for the controllers. So that actually just goes right here. And now what I'm gonna do is, instead of installing controllers, I'm actually going to install controller extension ports. The reason why is because the original controller ports are, the controllers rather, they're the Famicom style, so they're actually pretty like short. They don't have a lot of length, and it's kind of annoying because they just keep falling and flopping out. And so with these extension cables, it's actually going to make everything way better, because then I can just, you know, disconnect controllers and reconnect them as needed. You might even be able to use things like turbo controllers, or who knows, like the SNES Advantage, or who knows what. It's pretty neat. But yeah, so those guys go like that. And then we're gonna just put this over here. That's just the outer housing, and that actually does not, it just holds in place actually. So when you close everything up, that keeps it from moving around. So that's just a little carriage tray for the controllers. And then one of the last things is going to be this little bar here. This is just like an extra support bar. And I got to install this, actually on the inside. So this lines up on the inside, and you just screw it in on the two sides. And that about does it. So let me just go ahead and do that really quick. And then we're going to wire everything up to a multi-out and give it a test. Okay, so I have everything plugged in for an initial test. Here's the Super Famicom box down here. So I've got my multi-out just off to the side here, and there's an RGB cable that's going into the back. And then I also have composite video, and hilariously, I have that routed through a VCR. And so on the left-hand side, I'm gonna have composite video. On the right-hand side, I'm gonna have RGB. So the reason why I have this side-by-side comparison is because I genuinely have no clue if this is gonna work or not. So no matter what, composite should show up. So if I get nothing on the screen on the right, then I know I did something wrong. But yeah, it should work. We'll see. And no matter what, we'll see something on the left-hand side. So let me go ahead, turn this thing on. Okay, so the light's on, and I know it does take a minute to start up. Okay, so I'm getting nothing on the on the right-hand side of the screen. Not yet. Oh, but it's saying RGB now, so that's a good sign. Let's see what happens. It might be that I only get Super Nintendo RGB, and I don't get any of these menus that are specific to the Super Famicom box. That would make sense, actually. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, look at that, holy crap. So I'm not sure if this shows in camera, I hope it does, but the RGB is working perfectly. Let me just turn up the sound. Yep, and the sound is working nicely as well, so that's coming from the RGB SCART connection and not from the original speakers, so that's good too. All right, so let's just see what it does. Yeah, so that's really cool. All right, so we're getting the RGB only from the Super Nintendo side. This other stuff, this menu overlay, this is specific to the Super Famicom box. And of course, I didn't tap for that. And of course, I have no idea if it even generates an RGB. It might only be composite video only. And of course, that would have to be mixed in with the RGB. So, I mean, realistically, there's probably no easy way of getting those submenus. But as you can see, all of that stuff is in Japanese anyway, and not necessary for using the system. It's in demo mode right now, so you can see that it's cycling through the main menu, which shows you the 5 games that it has. And then there's a demo, a track mode, where it shows you each one. So let's go ahead and just pick a game and just see how that works. I don't fully know all of these menus and how it works, just because I haven't had a chance to look through it. And of course I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know what any of this means. There's another video on YouTube, I think it's by Gamester81, I believe. I'm gonna put a link in the description, but he actually owns one of these and he goes through exactly how this thing works. And so that's kind of outside the scope of my video, but I'm just gonna pick Star Fox here. So let's pick Star Fox, and I guess I'm gonna just pick one. I don't actually know what these different modes are. Let's see what this does. Hopefully it works. Oh, I guess that's not the right mode. Let me pick 5. Okay, I think this means that if I hit these buttons in combination, I can reset the console. Pretty sure. Awesome. So here is Star Fox 2. And so yeah, as you can see, the text is missing, but honestly, I prefer it that way. Like, I want to just play Star Fox and not have this distracting crap on the top that I can't even read. And hopefully you can see that it's extremely sharp in RGB. It looks exactly like it does on a Super Nintendo. So yeah, I think this modification was a success. Let me just turn this down for a moment. But yeah, I think this was a success. I still need to try S-Video and using different RGB cables like Sync on Luma, but I'm pretty sure those are going to work as well. So yeah, the final thing I really need to do is drill out a hole in this metal here. So I was hoping to put it here on the side, but there's actually no room. I mean, as you can see, this thing is just way too big. It's not going to fit over there, and there's barely enough slack with the wiring. So what I'm thinking is take this metal piece out, which comes out with 2 screws on the back, drill a hole that matches this, and then just put it into place over there. And that's gonna be the easiest and safest way to do it. Okay, so a little bit of time has passed since my first tests, and everything's all done with this thing, and I just kind of wanted to quickly show you the final result, which is right over here. So what I ended up doing was, just like I was saying on camera earlier, was I spoke to a friend of mine who does metal work, and he replaced this metal plate with a replica, except that the replica has a rectangular opening here for the Super Nintendo multi-out. So this is really nice because it basically looks official. And if my friend who owns this thing or anybody ever wants to revert it back to stock, you just reinstall the original metal plate and you just remove all of the wiring and it'll be a stock Super Famicom box. So yeah, and then here it is, just running using my GBS control, and it's running perfectly. So yeah, this turned out to be a really fun project. So yeah, back to the video. All right guys, well, that's it for this week's video. If you like this kind of content, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I try to have videos out every week whenever possible. And then of course, if you've got a console that you need repaired or modified, you can always reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right guys, well, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.